If you're a counselor educator in Australia, you know our world is changing, and it's changing fast. It really all boils down to one fundamental question we have to ask for every single student. Are they ready? So in this explainer, we're going to unpack a really critical framework that's designed to help us answer that exact question with confidence. It's called assurance of learning. So here's what we're going to cover. We'll kick things off with the shifting landscape of our field, and then we'll dive into the massive disruption caused by GenAI. After that, we'll get into the nuts and bolts of the assurance of learning framework, look at 3 different ways to put it into practice, and then talk about what's next for our profession. We're starting here because what we're facing really is a perfect storm. The pressures on counselor education aren't just trickling in one by one. Nope, they are all converging at the exact same time. And that creates this uniquely challenging, but honestly, also a really pivotal moment for us as educators. And that brings us right back to the core question. This is the absolute heart of our professional and our ethical responsibility. We are the gatekeepers to the profession, right? So we have to be sure, absolutely certain, that our graduates are competent and safe to practice. I mean, just look at this list. Look at the sheer volume of change that's hitting us all at once. We've got new standards and new competencies from PACFA, that's the Psychotherapy and Counselling Federation of Australia. There's new annual reporting to deal with, and on top of that, the first ever national standards in our profession's history. And as if that wasn't enough, the explosion of GenAI is forcing our national regulator, TEQSA, the Tertiary Education Quality and Standards Agency, to demand a whole new level of rigor in how we assure learning. It's a lot. So let's zoom in on GenAI for a second, because it's really the catalyst that's speeding everything up. It is forcing a fundamental rethink of how we assess learning and really what it even means to teach in this new world. And all this has triggered a major policy shift from TEQSA. For a few years, their approach to GenAI was what they called educative. They were helping us understand the risks. Well, that phase is over. Now the approach is regulatory. They expect us to prove that we're managing the risks to assessment integrity. The burden of proof has shifted, and it's landed squarely on our shoulders. Okay, so how do we meet this new demand? Well, the answer lies in this framework called Assurance of Learning, or AOL. And I know, another acronym, but this isn't just more jargon. It's a really practical, structured way for us to build integrity directly into our programs. So what is it exactly? Well, TEQSA's formal definition says it's about how we ensure, and this is the key word, demonstrate that our students have met the learning outcomes. In the age of AI, that one word, demonstrate, is everything. We can't just assume it anymore. Let's cut through all the regulatory speak. In simple, practical terms, what does assurance of learning boil down to? It's this. Can we verify who the student is, and can we directly watch them do the assessment? It's really just about being confident in what we actually see. And here's the good news. In practice, this means relying on assessment methods we already know and do really well. Things like observed role plays, supervised placements, live supervision sessions, oral presentations. The key here isn't to reinvent the wheel. It's just to be more intentional about where and how we use these secure, observable assessments that we're already familiar with. Now, to help institutions figure this out, TEQSA has actually outlined 3 main pathways for assessment reform. They're not just throwing the problem at us, they're giving us a map. So let's walk through each one. Okay, the first pathway is the big one. It's the most comprehensive. This isn't about just tacking on one secure assessment to a single unit. No, this is about a complete redesign of assessment across the entire program to create one coherent, integrated system. This program-wide approach really has 4 key features. First, all the assessments are designed as a single coherent system. Second, they get more complex as students move through the program. Third, you've got multiple supervised check-in points throughout the degree. And finally, and this is important, assessment design becomes a shared responsibility for the entire teaching team. All right, let's move on to the second pathway. Now, if that whole program redesign sounds a bit daunting, this one is a more targeted approach. Here, the focus is on embedding at least one secure assessment within each individual unit or subject. So this unit-level approach works a bit differently. It's all about simple identity verification and controlled conditions inside a single subject. And often, that secure assessment becomes what we call a hurdle, meaning students have to pass it to pass the unit, no matter how well they did on everything else. It's a more contained, but still a really powerful way to ensure integrity. And finally, we have the third pathway, which offers a flexible middle ground. It's a hybrid approach that strategically combines elements from both the program-wide and the unit-level models, kind of a best-of-both-worlds scenario. With this approach, you might, say, group a few units together for a coordinated assessment design. The focus here is on assuring progression at key moments in the program rather than in every single unit. It lets you integrate these secure assessments where they're most meaningful, and it shares the responsibility between the program leaders and the unit coordinators. So we've got these three pathways in mind. The big question is, how do we design our path forward? Well, the absolute key, is to connect whatever assessment strategy we choose directly back to our core professional standards. Because ultimately, any assurance of learning strategy has to be grounded in what we're trying to assure in the first place, the core PACFA competencies. Our assessments have to provide valid proof that our students can perform in these 5 critical domains. AOL is simply the mechanism we use to make sure that proof, that evidence is authentic. Given the scale of this challenge, it makes sense to tackle it together. The source material proposes a really collaborative way forward, establishing a National Heads of Counseling and Psychotherapy Education working group. The goal would be to create a national guide for AOL in counseling degrees, so we can share best practices and create some consistency. And that leaves us with one final, and I think crucial question to ponder. We have a shared set of national competencies. So could these be the foundation for a consistent, high-quality, and defensible approach to assurance of learning across all of our programs? It's a big challenge, for sure, but it is also a tremendous opportunity for our entire profession.